Welcome to my philosophy channel. This video may be long, but if you stay until the end, you may finally see the true nature of Aristotle and the agonizing price of tearing down the intellectual heavens to build a rational earth. We often remember him as a cold statue of logic, yet his true story bleeds with profound human passion, deep doubt, and relentless rebellion. Chapter 1. A true mind cannot sleep forever in the comforting shadow of a giant. Imagine the most famous fresco in history. Master Plato points upward toward the eternal realm of divine forms. Beside him stands Aristotle, firmly reaching downward toward the messy reality of mortal soil. This silent gesture captures the ultimate philosophical conflict of Western civilization. Do we seek truth in the stars or down in the dirt? Our narrative begins far away from the splendor of Athens, in the small northern border town of Stagira. In the year 384 before Christ, a boy was born into the household of the Macedonian royal court. His father, Nicomachus, was the personal physician to the king. Unlike philosophers staring at geometry, this boy grew up surrounded by blood, bone, and healing herbs. A physician cannot cure a dying patient with beautiful metaphors or abstract mathematical equations. Healing demands a brutal confrontation with physical reality, requiring meticulous observation and precise categorization. This early exposure to the fragile mechanics of living flesh permanently shaped the young mind. He learned early that the essence of life does not hide in invisible realms, but throbs within the veins of every breathing creature. However, the illusion of safety shatters quickly in an unforgiving world. When the boy reached the tender age of 10, the cruel scythe of death claimed both of his parents. Plunging him into sudden darkness, he discovered the terrifying truth that no amount of medical knowledge can halt the inevitable decay of mortal bodies. This profound loss instilled a deep understanding of human vulnerability and universal chaos. By the time he turned 17, he traveled to the cultural center of the world, the bustling metropolis of Athens. Escaping his inner grief, he initially surrendered to the intoxicating allure of the city. He squandered his precious inheritance on fleeting pleasures, drunken nights, and empty entertainment. Modern society mirrors this desperate avoidance, endlessly chasing instant gratification to mask the quiet terror of existential emptiness. Reduced to selling herbal remedies on the cobblestone streets to survive, he stumbled into a modest grove that would change human history. He walked into the academy where the aging master, Plato, was delivering a complex lecture on the abstract idea of the good. The subject matter was so profoundly dense that the impatient audience gradually slipped away, leaving only the echoes of an old man's voice. Eventually, only one solitary figure remained standing in the shadow of the olive trees. Plato noticed the stubborn young foreigner and gently asked for his name. When the youth replied, the old philosopher recognized an unprecedented fire burning behind those eyes. In that quiet moment, a destined connection forged between the architect of the heavens and the future cartographer of the earth, bridging two distinct intellectual worlds. For the next 20 years, he remained devoted to the academy, transforming from a wild youth into a towering intellect. His relentless work, ethic, and razor-sharp logic earned him a magnificent nickname from the master. Plato lovingly called him the mind of the school. Yet, even as he absorbed the majestic theories of his teacher, a quiet rebellion was gestating deep within his rational soul. Chapter 2. The journey from the rugged north to the elegant heart of Athens was not merely a change of geography. For the 17-year-old Aristotle, it was a violent collision between two entirely different dimensions of human reality. He arrived as a clumsy outsider, carrying the heavy dust of Macedonia upon his traveling cloak and the burden of loss within his grieving heart. Athens, in the midst of the 4th century, before Christ, was a city intoxicated by its own intellectual grandeur. Every street corner vibrated with the heated debates of sophists and the high rhetoric of ambitious politicians. To the polished citizens of this urban labyrinth, the young Aristotle was initially nothing more than a wealthy foreigner with a strange accent and peculiar medical habits. He sought out the fabled academy of Plato, a sanctuary of wisdom, tucked away within a serene grove of ancient olive trees. This was not a rigid institution of modern rote learning, but a vibrant living community dedicated to the arduous pursuit of absolute truth. Here, the finest minds of Greece gathered to strip away the deceptive layers of the material world entirely. For 2 continuous decades, this hallowed ground served as his primary intellectual laboratory and spiritual home. He did not simply listen to lectures. He immersed himself in the relentless dialectic process of questioning everything. He devoured every available text on mathematics, geometry, and astronomy, attempting to construct a grand map of the infinite universal's order that governed all human existence. His peers frequently observed him, pacing the silent shaded paths. Long after the sun had vanished below the horizon, while others slept, he remained awake, in the flickering light of a simple oil lamp, filling countless wax tablets with meticulous notes. This insatiable hunger for knowledge was not driven by vain ambition, but by a desperate need to find permanent meaning. Plato noticed this exceptional intensity and frequently called him the reader, or the mind of the academy. The master recognized that this student possessed a unique capacity to hold contradictory ideas within his brain simultaneously. However, a master also knows that a great student will eventually outgrow even the most magnificent intellectual nest ever constructed by a human hand. The academy taught that true reality existed only in the eternal realm of perfection, while the physical world was a shadow. This idealistic vision offered a beautiful escape from the suffering and decay of mortal life. Yet, the son of a physician could not entirely abandon the tangible reality of the beating heart and the growing leaf. He began to wonder if we could truly understand the sun without first examining the smallest grain of sand. Why should the physical world be dismissed as a mere illusion if it was structured with such mathematical precision? This quiet internal tension marked the birth of the empirical method, forcing him to balance pure logic with direct physical observation of reality. Modern humans often experience this same psychological conflict between our high digital aspirations and our physical fragility. We create perfect virtual worlds while our real environments crumbled around us in neglect. Aristotle refused to choose between the two, seeking instead to find the universal form dwelling directly within the individual material object itself without any separation. As he approached his 40th year, the intellectual debt he owed to Plato remained immeasurable and deeply personal. Yet, the call of personal integrity frequently demands the sacrifice of comfortable tradition for the sakes of genuine progress. He realized that to honor his teacher truly, he had to dare to correct him, even if it meant standing alone against the world. The brightest mind must eventually step out from the shadow of its master to face the blinding light of its own discovery. Chapter 3. The departure from Athens marked a monumental turning point in his intellectual evolution. He crossed the sparkling waters of the Aegean Sea, seeking refuge in the coastal city of Assos, in Asia Minor. His host was a former classmate named Hermias, who had transformed into a powerful local ruler. Here, he hoped to build a new community dedicated to practical wisdom. In this vibrant coastal kingdom, he discovered a profound personal truth that no textbook could ever teach. He fell deeply in love with a beautiful and intelligent woman named Pythias, who was the adopted daughter of his royal host. Their marriage and the subsequent birth of their child grounded his high philosophical theories in the tender, bleeding reality of genuine human affection and familial responsibility. However, the illusion of peace was violently shattered when brutal political betrayal struck the kingdom. His beloved friend and protector, Hermias, was ruthlessly assassinated by merciless enemies. This devastating loss forced the grieving philosopher to confront the terrifying chaos of human existence. He realized that abstract concepts of perfect justice offered absolutely no protection against the cold iron swords wielded by vicious tyrants. Fleeing the bloody political storm, he sought sanctuary on the tranquil and isolated island of Lesbos. Stripped of his wealth and academic titles, he wandered the deserted beaches with a broken heart. Instead of looking upward to seek comfort, in the silent heavens, he deliberately cast his gaze downward into the murky, teeming tidal pools. Grief mysteriously pushed him toward empirical discipline. He exchanged the pristine marble halls of theoretical debates for the muddy shores of empirical observation. With relentless curiosity, he began meticulously dissecting strange fish, tracking the elusive octopuses, and classifying countless wild plants. He astonishingly discovered that the grand and majestic design of the universe was secretly encoded within the slimy intestines of sea creatures and the fragile veins of ordinary green leaves. Through this painstaking biological research, he formulated his revolutionary theory of the four causes. He understood that every living organism was constantly striving to actualize its own hidden internal potential. A tiny seed desperately yearns to become a massive tree, not because of some distant celestial command, but because reaching perfection is the inherent and natural purpose woven directly into its biological fabric. By dragging philosophy down into the mud and the blood of the natural world, he systematically healed the ancient fracture between the mind and the body. He proved that genuine science is born only through the exhaustive and patient observation of the deeply ordinary. Truth was no longer a distant phantom, but a tangible reality waiting patiently to be touched and understood by human hands. A philosopher only truly understands the majesty of the heavens when he is finally willing to wash the mud from his own calloused hands. Chapter 4. In the year 343 before Christ, a royal summons arrived from the formidable King Philip II of Macedonia. He invited the wandering philosopher to return to his rugged homeland to tutor his 13-year-old son, Alexander. This unprecedented invitation forged the most famous, yet profoundly complicated, educational relationship in the entire history of human civilization. They established their private school in the lush, secluded sanctuary of Mysa, far from the bloody intrigues of the royal court. Here, the middle-aged philosopher of reason met the fiery young prince of ambition. Alexander possessed the terrifying energy of a caged lion, desperately yearning for eternal glory, while his teacher sought the quiet, invisible order of the natural world. He taught the young prince the magnificent verses of Homer, weaving epic tales of Achilles and heroic tragedy. He instructed him in the delicate arts of politics, ethics, and the absolute necessity of rational moderation. Yet, teaching moderation to a youth destined to conquer the known world is like attempting to hold back a raging ocean with a fragile wooden shield. The master believed that a perfect society must remain small, governed by a stable middle class and bound by strict constitutional laws. The student, however, dreamed of a boundless global empire, erasing all borders under his supreme dictatorial command. This profound ideological chasm highlights the eternal tragedy of philosophy when it collides directly with the intoxicating allure of absolute political power. When King Philip was unexpectedly assassinated, the 20-year-old Alexander ascended the bloody throne, immediately launching his ruthless military campaigns. The student marched eastward to subjugate nations, while the aging teacher prepared to walk a vastly different path. Their physical separation marked the permanent divorce between the quiet pursuit of intellectual truth and the violent execution of imperial ambition. Even the greatest philosophical mind cannot tame the destructive fires of human ambition once they are fully ignited by power. Chapter 5. In the year 335 before Christ, the mature philosopher returned to the bustling streets of Athens, no longer a grieving student seeking comfort in the shadow of Plato. He arrived as a master of empirical reality. He founded the Lyceum, a radiant new school dedicated not to heavenly shadows but to the meticulous categorization of the tangible world. This was his monument to human reason. Unlike the sedentary meditations found within the ancient academy, the Lyceum was characterized by constant and vigorous movement. He became known as the peripatetic philosopher, walking restlessly along the shaded colonnades while delivering his profound lectures. Why do humans constantly move forward? Perhaps physical motion naturally stimulates the stagnant mind, reminding us that absolute truth is never entirely still, but exists in a perpetual state of dynamic becoming. Human beings inherently dread the unpredictable chaos of the wild and unstructured universe. To conquer this deep existential fear, we attempt to name, classify, and organize our confusing surroundings into predictable patterns. He undertook the most ambitious intellectual project in human history, attempting to single-handedly map every conceivable branch of human knowledge. He believed that a chaotic world could only be mastered through the disciplined application of perfect order. To achieve this massive goal, he had to invent an entirely new instrument for the human intellect. He created formal logic, establishing the unbreakable rules of the syllogism to guide rational thought safely through the dark forest of deception. Logic provided a reliable compass for the vulnerable human mind, ensuring that our conclusions remained firmly anchored in solid truth rather than being blindly tossed by fleeting emotional illusions. Beyond the tangible sciences of biology and physics, he relentlessly pursued what he called the first philosophy, which we now recognize as metaphysics. He sought to understand the foundational essence of existence itself, searching for the ultimate unmoved mover who sparked the universal engine. This divine intellect did not actively command the world like a petty tyrant, but silently attracted all living things toward perfect rationality and ultimate beauty. Yet, he never forgot the sweaty reality of everyday human struggle. In his moral masterpiece, he declared that the ultimate goal of human existence is profound human flourishing. How do we achieve this elusive happiness amidst dangerous temptations? He proposed the brilliant concept of the golden mean, arguing that true virtue always resides perfectly between two extreme vices, requiring constant and careful calibration of our innate biological passions. Courage is the rational middle ground between cowardice and recklessness. just as generosity balances greed and extravagance. Modern individuals constantly swing between crushing burnout and lazy apathy, desperately seeking an imaginary perfection. He taught that moral excellence is not a magical divine gift, but a deliberate daily habit forged through constant trial and error. We become truly just only by willingly performing ordinary acts of justice every single day. He expanded this ethical vision into the complex realm of politics, declaring that man is inherently a political animal. An isolated individual cut off from the community is either a beast or a god. He understood that our rational faculties only bloom within a structured society. Laws and civic friendships must constantly exist to protect the fragile human mind from the brutal and unforgiving savagery of total wilderness isolation. The truest measure of human intelligence is not found in the wild ambition to conquer the world, but in the quiet discipline to master the self. Chapter 6. The illusion of safety in Athens lasted only as long as the mighty Macedonian sword cast its protective shadow over the Lyceum. But empires built upon blood are inherently fragile. In the year 323 before Christ, devastating news arrived that instantly shattered his world. The invincible Alexander the Great had suddenly died in Babylon at the mere age of 32. This sudden vacuum of global power unleashed a furious wave of suppressed hatred across Athens. For decades, the proud citizens had suffocated under Macedonian dominance, quietly boiling with deep humiliation. Unable to strike the dead conqueror, they turned their vicious anger toward the most prominent Macedonian sympathizer living within their city walls. The aging philosopher became the perfect scapegoat for a traumatized society seeking vengeance. To mask their purely political bloodlust, the corrupt Athenian authorities revived an ancient and highly convenient weapon. They officially charged the master with the exact same crime that had killed Socrates several decades earlier: impiety. They willingly weaponized sacred religion to destroy pure intellect. A society driven by blind fear will always attempt to assassinate its wisest voices under the false pretense of defending tradition. Unlike Socrates, who stubbornly drank the lethal poison to fulfill an abstract civic duty, Aristotle chose a radically different path. He pragmatically refused to offer his own neck to an unjust and irrational mob. Gathering his family and his most precious scientific manuscripts, he quietly slipped away under the cover of darkness. He famously declared that he would not allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy. He fled across the ocean to Chalcis, the peaceful coastal homeland of his deceased mother. However, this physical escape could not erase the profound psychological trauma of sudden exile. Leaving behind his beloved Lyceum felt like deliberately amputating a vital limb. The crushing weight of political betrayal and exhausting travel slowly destroyed his declining health, causing a severe stomach illness to flare with merciless intensity. In the cool autumn of 322 before Christ, as he reached his 62nd birthday, his mighty physical body finally yielded. Surrounded by his weeping daughter and his devoted partner Herpyllis, he stared into the approaching darkness without any traces of fear. He had spent his entire life meticulously categorizing the tangible universe, yet he now bravely faced the ultimate uncharted territory. Even the most brilliant mind capable of measuring the infinite stars must eventually surrender to the silent dust of the earth. Chapter 7. When the physical body of the great master finally turned to dust, his precious manuscripts faced a terrifying fate. To protect them from greedy kings and destructive wars, his devoted followers hid the fragile scrolls deep inside a dark and damp cellar. For over 200 years, the greatest intellectual achievement of human history was left to rot quietly among the worms and the shadows. However, genuine truth possesses a miraculous and unyielding resilience against the destructive forces of time. While Western Europe eventually plunged into the superstitious gloom of the Dark Ages, his surviving texts traveled eastward. Brilliant Arab and Persian scholars embraced his magnificent logic, painstakingly translating his words and keeping the sacred flame of rationality burning brightly throughout the vast expanses of the Islamic world. Centuries later, his reborn philosophy flowed back into an awakening Europe, triggering a massive intellectual earthquake. The Christian Church, which initially feared this pagan rationalism, eventually adopted him as their ultimate intellectual authority. Master theologians like Thomas Aquinas brilliantly synthesized his unmoved mover with the biblical God, elevating the humble biologist from Stagira into an almost infallible divine prophet of the medieval era. Herein lies the most profound and bitter irony of his entire intellectual legacy. The very man who invented the empirical method, who constantly urged his students to relentlessly question and observe nature, was tragically transformed into an unquestionable dogmatic idol. For over 1,000 years, daring to contradict his obsolete theories about falling objects or celestial mechanics was deemed a dangerous heresy. Humanity frequently traps itself within the golden cages built by our greatest thinkers. We crave the comfort of absolute certainty far more than we desire the anxious freedom of continuous discovery. It took the defiant courage of brilliant scientific rebels like Galileo and Newton to finally smash this rigid Aristotelian paradigm, tearing down the stagnant idol to resurrect the true spirit of science. Yet they defeated his scientific errors only by utilizing the exact same razor-sharp tools of logical deduction that he had originally forged. Today, we continue to reside within the vast invisible architecture of his majestic mind. Every single time we classify a biological species, debate a constitutional law, or program a computer using binary logic, we are simply walking down his ancient path. He teaches us that philosophy is not a magical escape from human suffering, but the brave and methodical confrontation with our chaotic reality. If this epic journey into the mind of the ultimate empirical master has enriched your soul, please like this video and subscribe to our philosophy channel. We relentlessly continue to explore the timeless ideas that secretly shape our modern world. Are you bravely observing the reality right in front of you, or are you simply staring blindly at the shadows of someone else's truth?